Hello warrior students, what's up YouTube? This is Words of the Lich King Arms Warrior Guide Update number. I lost track, but it's going to be in the title anyways. So in this video I'm going to talk about all the things that I have learned since the launch of Rev Classic, and it's actually quite a lot. So the first thing we are going to talk about is pre-raid Arms Warrior Sword versus Axe, or to be more specific, Sword of Justice versus Colossal Skull-clad Cleaver. After this we are going to talk about some rotation fine-tuning. We are going to talk about a strange interaction with hit or bug or whatever that I have discovered on this heroic training dummy, which is supposed to be a boss minion. We are going to talk about some trinket choices that you have instead of Dark Moon Card Greatness, because Dark Moon Card Greatness is very expensive. And then we are going to talk about the two main talent builds a little bit, like the Commanding Presence version, or how I would call it, Improved Execute version, and the Insight version. And at last I'm going to show you the hybrid tanking spec that I'm using to grind heroics extremely fast. And yeah, so let's start with the first topic, and that is Sword of Justice versus Colossal Skull-clad Cleaver. So if you know what you're doing with the Sword of Justice deals the same amount of damage than your Colossal Skull-clad Cleaver on average. However, it has the potential to deal less damage, but it as well has the potential to deal way more damage than the Colossal Skull-clad Cleaver, depend on your luck. Why is that? It's because the itemization of the Sword of Justice is basically a wet dream for warrior. You have strength on it, you have 105 stamina on it, you have a socket, and you have critical strike rating, and the cherry on top, it's extremely slow. It's a 3.8 weapon. Those weapons are relatively rare these days, and they are extremely good. They add a lot of value to your slam, and your auto attacks are going to hit like a truck. Your sword spec hits are going to hit very hard, and they are going to grant you a lot of rage. If you get lucky, you can just continue with a very expensive rotation just because of sword spec feeding you rage all the time. And on the other hand, Colossal Skull-clad Cleaver, even though it's an axe, which is really good, and even though it has more DPS, because it's an epic, the itemization is relatively poor, to be honest. 3.4 seconds attack speed, not very nice actually. 90 strength is good. Agility instead of crit is obviously something that we don't want. It has a little bit less stamina, which is nothing really that, which isn't really important, but whatever. And it has haste on it. And we all know what that means. Haste is not really something that is very desirable for us arms warriors. If you don't believe me, you can see in the background there is running footage of me testing out those two weapons. Now, if I'm doing tests, I don't only test like each weapon once. I use them for like more than 20 tests in a row. I take them into dungeons, I go quest with them, I do some PvP, I use different talent builds, different glyphs, and I'm doing a shit ton of testing, and I even do some calculation together with this. So it's extremely accurate, and you can trust me. If you know what you're doing, the Sword of Justice is pretty much equal in the power level with the Colossal Skull-clad Cleaver. And therefore, if you have Sword of Justice, or you like the playstyle of sword spec more than the playstyle of the axe, then go for it. You can do it. It's not a DPS loss by any stretch of imagination. So yeah. So next up, we want to talk about rotation fine-tuning. So one thing that I have discovered that was different on a private server, and that is different from what I remember, and this is that Heroic Throw resets your swing timer. Like if you pay attention here, now I throw, and the hit is not coming out. So yeah, it cancels your swing timer, so you have to throw it right after you swing if you want to use it into your rotation, which I would recommend. The next thing that I want to talk about is Shattering Throw. I see a lot of warriors sleeping on this ability. It deals some nice damage. It needs to be casted 1.5 seconds, yes, and it costs 25 rage. However, it reduces the target's armor by 20% for 10 seconds. So, however, if there's anyone else that deals physical DPS attacking the target right now, you get some nice value out of this ability. In addition, if you have multiple warriors, you can basically chain those shattering throws if you like, if you communicate this with your other warriors, like let's say for example I throw first and then after 10 seconds the tank will use shattering throw and then the next DPS or whatever. It's actually pretty nice to have like the debuff of Shattering Throw throughout the whole duration of Bloodlust on the target. For anyone that is like physical DPS, they will be very thankful for this. So yeah, be smart with this ability if you are going into your first raid. Now the next rotation fine-tuning thing that I want to talk about is, a lot of you guys are engineering, right? So you have your engineering gloves that can be used to get a little bit of haste, and you have your unused trinket. Now your unused trinket and your gloves, they will share a little cooldown. Like for example, if I press my macro here, I get a 20-second cooldown on my gloves. You want to use your unused trinket before you use your gloves. Like if you, for example, have this one, this grants you armor penetration, or you have Berserker's Call or whatever, Sphere of the Red Dragon's Blood, use your trinket before you use your gloves, because most of the time you're going to have Bloodlust at the start of the fight, and stacking haste with haste is less efficient than stacking attack power with haste. So yeah, keep that in mind. The next thing is that if your Mirror of Truth will not proc within like the first 15 seconds or so, you can then delay your gloves. You can then delay your engineering gloves a little bit until you see your Mirror of Truth proc. You want to keep that in mind throughout the whole fight. Like you want to get maybe a weak hour for an ICD, or you get a feeling for it. And then every time you know that Mirror of Truth could proc in the next couple of seconds, you can delay your gloves and chant for the Mirror of Truth proc. I will have 1 weak hour for the Mirror of Truth proc that shows when it's up. Right now I do not have an ICD weak hour, but I will get one in the future. And the same goes for like things like Blade Storm or Charge Reefs or anything like this. For example, if you know that your Mirror of Truth is going to proc relatively soon, you can consider holding on to your Blade Storm. You can consider holding on to your Heroic Throw. You can consider holding on to your Charge Reef, and it's as soon as it procs, you have your charge that feeds you a little bit of rage. You have then your gloves and chant. You want to spend as much rage, you want to stack as many abilities on your Mirror of Truth procs as possible. So yeah, there's that. Now we are going to talk about execute and mortal strike. When do you want to execute? When do you want to mortal strike? Speaking only of sudden death procs, in execute phase it's easy, you hit execute. However, if you get a sudden death proc, do you want to mortal strike or do you want to execute? There are two answers, and it depends on your improved execute, like if you have it or not. If you have improved execute, you always prioritize execute over mortal strike in case of a sudden death proc, because execute casted with sudden death leaves you at 10 rage. If you have 2 out of 2 into improved execute, execute costs 10 rage. So being able to cast an execute, then being at 10 rage, and then cast another execute at 10 rage is, yeah, basically your execute that you just casted was for free. So it's instant, it deals like 2.5k damage non-critical, and it's for free. It's like the best, it's like your best ability. Out of all the things that you could press, that you could imagine, an execute for free, there's nothing that is going to be better than that. So therefore, if you are going for the improved execute build, execute is going to be first prio, always. And then if you don't, however, have improved execute, you cannot spam cast execute because it only leaves you at 10 rage. and execute will cost 15. So therefore you want to prioritize Mortal Strike over execute if you cannot cast Mortal Strike after execute. So if you have like, let's say 40 rage and you cast execute, after this you cannot cast Mortal Strike, right? Because you only have 10 rage left. So you only cast execute over Mortal Strike if you have like 60 rage, or you expect rage gain in the next second, basically. However, if Mortal Strike is not ready in the moment where you get your execute proc, then obviously execute comes for Mortal Strike. So, and then at last, for the rotation fine-tuning, we are going to talk about one more thing, and this is Slam versus Mortal Strike, because we already talked about this in the last video, but I still got a lot of questions about it, so I try to answer those questions once more. If you want to cast Slam or do you want to cast Mortal Strike, depends on too many factors that are different for every single one of you, so I cannot give you one 100% accurate answer. However, I can give you a general rule that is very accurate. If you can afford using Mortal Strike on cooldown while maintaining a smooth rotation, so filling the time in between with 1 or 2 slams, cast Mortal Strike on cooldown. If you cannot afford Mortal Strike on cooldown, you cast Mortal Strike when your rage level gets very high, for example like 60 or so. If your rage level goes above that, you cast 1 MS. Then you have to factor in that sometimes you can expect to get some rage in the near future because of damage taken or because of an outer attack, and sometimes you can factor in this rage gain, like this average rage gain that you're going to expect, into your decision making if you want to cast improved Mortal Strike. For example, if I have a sword spec ready, I know that I could get a sword spec proc and I'm already at 30 rage, I'm very likely to make the decision that I actually cast an MS, even though I'm only at 30 rage. And most of the time it works out for me. So yeah, this is like the decision making that you want to make in terms of improved Mortal Strike versus Slam. Okay, what was next? I think the trinket choice. Yes, so the trinket choice. So I have some recommendations for you. The first one is in a scissor fragment. That's the name, I think. For me in particular, this is very good because in my burst window, I get attack power through my orc racial. I get attack power maybe throughout Mirror of Truth or with Mirror of Truth, and I get haste from Bloodlust. So, like we discovered in the last video, stats work better together than they work alone. So if you have a lot of attack power, adding more attack power is not providing as much value as adding maybe haste or crit or armor penetration. And therefore, in Scissor Fragment is a very good option together with Mirror of Truth, together with your Orc ratio, together with Bloodlust, because you're stacking a lot of different stats, even though it's only 300 armor penetration. But don't forget that this trinket provides some nice attack power on top of that. Like 150 is a nice chunk. It's a nice, decent chunk. So the next trinket that I would recommend is Sphere of Red Dragon's Blood. This one is really strong. However, if you don't need the hit on this trinket, like if you cannot get any value out of this, it's not very good, obviously. Then we have Berserker's Call, is still pretty decent, but I would give it to Incisor Fragment, gosh, this name, over Berserker's Call. And then we have Shard of Condemned, because Shard of Condemned gives you a lot of expertise, and if you get some extra value in your other items, because you can skip some expertise with your Shard of Condemned, then it's very nice. And then we have the attack power proc that is up for like 40 to 50% of the time, which is very decent. So yeah, Shard of Condemned still pretty nice. So that's it for your trinket choices and why they could be good for you. And next up we are going to talk about the two builds, Insight versus Improved Execute. Now I already talked about why Improved Execute is so magical, and yeah, I really like it. I think I'm going to go with the Improved Execute build, even if I have someone that is like already spec'd into Commanding Presence, or a Paladin that provides an improved Blessing of Might, because if I don't need to skill Commanding Presence, I can skill Unbridled Wrath, which provides some extra rage, and right now rage gain is like very small, so I expect some decent value out of Unbridled Wrath, especially because I as well want to try out Sword first, and Sword has those extra attacks that can proc Unbridled Wrath as well, and maybe then I could spec some points into Improved Execute. You do not actually want to spec into Booming Voice, or at least I would not really recommend, because with the Glyph for your shout, the minor Glyph, your shout is already up for 4 minutes, and I expect fights in Naxxramas to be 2 minutes, and therefore you don't need to shout twice in a fight, even without Booming Voice. And if you cannot cut down the amount of shouts that you're going to do throughout the fight with Booming Voice is pretty much almost a 0 value talent. So yeah, I'm not going to go for that. And then yeah, you have your Insight build, which is good. And I tested those builds against each other, and I found them to be relatively similar in terms of DPS. It depends on your execute procs. Like if you get a lot of execute procs, if you get a good execute phase, then I would actually give it to the Improved Execute build. However, if you get lucky with Heroic Strike crits, and if you do not get lucky with your execute procs, then Insight is going to be better, and obviously in AoE, Insight is going to be on top as well. So yeah, that's like your builds and everything about Arms Warrior, and now we are going to talk about the hybrid tanking build that I'm using to grind heroics really fast. In the background you can see some footage, and yeah, what are the talents? The talents are pretty aggressive. We need to spec 37 points into arms until we get 2 out of 2 Unrelenting Assault. We cannot pick up Juggernaut because we don't have points for it, and because the trash packs are going to die so fast that with Juggernaut we are not able to charge every pull. On protection, we go into 2 out of 2 Improved Revenge and 1 into Shield Mastery. We don't pick up Last Stand because that's for Cowards, and yeah, we can spec 2 into Anticipation, but sadly not more than that, because in Fury we are going to pick up Enrage, we are going to pick up Improved Cleave, and we are going to pick up Death Wish. Now Death Wish for obvious reasons, it deals some nice damage. Enrage for obvious reasons, it gives us basically 100% uptime on another 10% deep damage bonus. Piercing Howl to kite some mobs, because we are going to be relatively squishy for a tank, but yeah, killing the mobs really fast helps with that, and if you get in trouble you use Piercing Howl, you intervene to your healer, and you kite a little bit. And then we have Improved Cleave, which the faster your weapon, the more value you can get out of this, because yeah, you are able to cast more cleaves, and this talent increases the on-hit damage basically that Cleaves provide. Like Cleave provides some extra damage, and this extra damage gets increased by 120%. If you hit 3 targets very often, obviously you get a lot of value. If those Cleaves crit, the value from this talent gets doubled, so Insight helps with that as well. And therefore for Glyphs we use Glyph of Cleaving, we use Glyph of Sweeping Strikes, and one very important glyph is Glyph of Revenge, because this build lacks a little bit on single target if you get unlucky or if you don't have shield block up for the pull. With this glyph, our Heroic Strike will cost no rage after we use Revenge, and we can basically spam Heroic Strike, Revenge, and we fill this with Shield Slam and Thunder Armor. And yeah, with this glyph you can like build up a threat lead of like 100k within your shield block window, which is pretty insane. Like no matter what happens after this, you're basically going to hold threat for the rest of the fight. So at last I wanted to talk to you guys about something that has to do with hit. So on this training dummy that is supposed to be a boss, I only need 6% hit to hit him all the time, basically, so to be hit capped. I don't know if it's because it's the dummy or it's because Blizzard is a dummy. So yeah, we are going to test this one out as soon as we first step into a real raid with real bosses. And yeah, so if we need less hit, I like it. Means more DPS. DPS is always fun. So yeah. Alright, that's it. Pretty long video, but a lot of informations. I hope you learned something, like always, and I wish you guys a lucky and funny, or yeah, I don't know, first raid ID. And we will see each other in the next one. Until then, stay tuned and take care.